Hey everybody, it's May, and tonight I would like to go over day 3's notes that I have in my Spiral Bible for day 3 of our Bible reading plan, One Story That Leads to Jesus. So if that seems interesting, just stay tuned. Okay guys, so last night was kind of like very in-depth and a little heavy, but tonight it's not really so bad. So the scripture reading today was for Genesis chapter 8 through 11 and Psalms chapter 3. So last night we ended up, let's see, what page did we end up on? We got through this. This is chapter 5. I did go back in and add these because I thought it was when he was building the ark for the 120 years, the people in the city were like laughing at him. And I felt like Enoch was so important here because God just like took him away and he didn't have to experience true death. I felt like he needed, a little representative there. So anyway, so tonight we're starting on chapter 8. And I had went through these notes right here on last night's video. So in chapter 8, we're talking about how the flood is going to subside and how the earth is going to begin to dry out and it's going to become safe. But there's some things that go on before, we disembark the ark. You know what I mean? So it says, it starts out in chapter 8, it says, "But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark." And it made me go like, did God forget him? I mean, what's going on here? I mean, when I started reading the notes, I was like, what? Okay, so the verse doesn't mean that God forgot about Noah, because we know God doesn't forget about anything. He's not ever going to do that. But rather, it signifies, okay, his intention and acknowledgement to actively fulfill his faithful covenant he had with Noah. So it's like calling back into how this whole process started of him building the ark back here. Is he had made a covenant. Remember, we went over Noah's covenant. So it's not that God forgot, it's that it's being brought back to the focus of our story is that God is now going to act faithfully according to his covenant with Noah, because Noah has fulfilled what he had asked him to do. So one of the first things that Noah does after they, come to rest on the mountains is he lets out a raven. Okay, now the raven flies back and forth and back and forth, and it went to and from until the waters were dried up from the earth. So the raven didn't come back. Okay, so the raven is a symbol of engagement both with salvation and with sin. It is a mirror of our own lives. We engage in sin, but we return to salvation. Okay, so the next thing he does is he sends out a dove. And the dove goes out, and he comes right back. So that means, he didn't find anything he needed. Now, a raven only needs to eat meat. It does not have to eat vegetation. So one of the reasons why the raven didn't come back is because he didn't need to find a tree. He didn't need to find plants. He didn't need to find any of that. All he needed to do was find carcasses and, not to be gross or anything, but corpses, things that had died, in the consuming of the earth with the flood, for him to, sustain himself with, to eat. And so the raven found that. He found that, no worries. But that doesn't help Noah and them because, they're not sea creatures. They need, and they need vegetation. So he sends out the first dove, and the dove doesn't, find anything, so he comes back. Now he sends out a second dove, okay, 7 days later, and when he sent this dove out, it comes back with an olive branch, which means, the earth is dried up to the point now where it's sprouting trees and bushes and vegetation, and that's what God has given man to eat is plants and vegetables and, where to eat. Botanically. we're vegetarians up until this point in the Bible, whether anybody realizes that or not, is we are vegetarians up until the flood, okay? And so the the second dove actually finds vegetation, and so Noah's like, yay, the earth it's taking care of itself. We're going to be able to go out. But he waits. It says, then he waited another 7 days, and he sent forth a dove, and this time it didn't return. Okay, so now he knows, yeah, there's more than enough food out here. The raven didn't come back because it found what it needed. The doves, he didn't come back because he definitely found what he needs. Does he get off the boat and get the animals out? No, he waits. And it says, in the 601st year, in the first month, in the first day of the month, the waters were dried from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering on the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. Okay, he didn't get out. And the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Then God says to go out from the ark, and you and your wife, and you and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So then, and I got this cute little picture where like Noah and all the animals are behind him, and there's like the little door, getting out. They all get out. And the notes that I put here for the dove was the dove returns with an olive branch, indicating that the earth was dry enough for plant life, and the third time Noah sent out the dove, it never did return. Then down here, because we know that Noah waited on God to tell him when it was time to go, Noah waited to hear from God that it was time to leave the ark. Nearly 2 months later, God gave the command to leave the ark, along with his family and every living thing aboard. After a full year on the ark, it was time to begin again on the earth. Okay. So when we get out of the ark, one of the first things that Noah does is he built an altar. And this is the first time in the Bible that it specifically says anything about an altar, okay? And then I wrote over here, Noah's first action was to build an altar to God. He used the clean animals from the extra pairs of clean animals. The burnt offering, and we went over different types of offerings last night in the video. The burnt offering pleases the Lord, and he makes a commitment to never again curse the earth through a flood. He also commits to never again wipe out all the living creatures, though he recognizes that humanity will always carry evil intentions in their heart. I mean, the Lord knows this. He knows this about us. Left to our own devices, we will continue to commit sin. And he knows that, and he still loves us, and he promises he's not going to do this to us again. Okay, so now we're going to start chapter 9 here. And it's pretty cool because there was a lot of things that I learned today when I was reading it that I had heard, just never had really stopped to reflect on it. It says, God once again blesses mankind with the ability to reproduce and fill the earth. But now, all the animals would fear humanity, okay? And the reason we know that is because back here it says, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast on the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish in the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. And I was like, wow, I wonder what changed. Was it, the animals got PTSD from the ark because they were in there with us for so much, but that's not what it is. It's because before, plants were given as our only food source, whereas now humanity is given permission, overtly permission strictly from God, that says that we have permission to eat animals, but not the blood of animals, okay? And that is reflected in this verse over here. Let me find it. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I give you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood, I will have a reckoning. For every beast I will require it, and from man. From and what he's talking about, the reckoning, is that there's now rules, okay? If a person kills another person or an animal kills a person, God now requires the killer's life to be taken. Remember, back here in chapter, what was it? We were talking about Cain and Abel. He allows Cain to live. He just drives him out from this, from his, being able to be, where God can see him. God puts a curse on him. He commits the first murder, but God did not kill him. Now there is a reckoning after the flood. It is, if you do this, if one person kills another person, or an animal even kills a person, the killer must be taken. His life must be taken. And this is to serve as a protection against violence. And when he's talking about, it's like the pre-flood era, where the people were just so wicked and so bad. God does not want to return to that state. And so this is kind of like a protection. Like, if you take a life, yours will be forfeit as well. Okay? So now he's going to talk about, he's going to expand on his promise not to flood the earth again, not to kill every living creature in the world with a flood again. It says, God now expands on his promise from chapter 8 to never kill every creature on earth with a flood. God establishes a universal covenant with humanity and the animals. Okay? And he declares that he will make a sign of it. God will cause his bow, the rainbow, that appears to remind them, that appears in conjunction with a storm, to remind him of his promise. It serves as a reminder of God's grace and mercy to humanity as well. Okay? Pretty awesome. I love it. And it says Noah, Noah, Noah gets drunk from a vineyard, okay? He plants all this wine, all these grapes, and he makes some wine, and he gets drunk, and he fell asleep naked. And Ham walks in the tent and sees his father's nakedness and tells his two brothers, Shem and Japheth. And Japheth and Shem take great care to cover up their father and not to look upon him. And when Noah wakes up, he curses Ham because of the dishonor. The story demonstrates that all people, even though they might be used by God, are fallible and prone to making mistakes. But it's kind of like a, I don't know, I saw a parallel here, and maybe it's just me, but, when gluttony or drunkenness, I guess we can look at that as a sin, right? Well, we should. And when we see the nakedness in the garden, the sin, they weren't ashamed. So when he commits this, sin of drunkenness, and he's there naked and his son looks upon him, it's like when he wakes up and finds out he was naked and he was exposed, he has something to be ashamed of. It's very reminiscent of the Garden of Eden, especially, since it was another fruit here, and it's another action, a choice that he made. It was just, there's not a whole lot of commentary about this. People just basically describe it as, there was this weird instance with Noah and his sons, but there's also kind of like that symmetry there, between the Garden of Eden and then this garden that he plants his vineyard in, and the nakedness and the shame. Yeah, it was just something that, I took away from it. And when he curses them, he says, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers," he said. He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." Okay, so he's just really mad at Ham. He really is. But this is also the first hint that Shem's line are going to lead to the Israelites. And we all know that the Israelites are God's chosen people. So rather than focusing on lineage, when we get into chapter 10 here, because it's, the begots. The way I looked at it was, this is super important, this one right here. Of course, all the genealogies are, is because the Old Testament and the New Testament try to line up genealogies to say that, Jesus was born of the house of David. Okay? So, but we're wanting to see, from the beginning of the other genealogies from Adam It led us to Noah, the one man that God found favor in and was the rescuer for the people here on earth, his family and the animals on earth because of God making a covenant with them. So the genealogy from Adam to Noah was very important. So of course now the genealogy of Noah and his descendants to any future people that we're going to be talking about in the Bible is going to be of great importance. But also there's no people on the earth, so we're repopulating here. So where we went through all of Adam's descendants to get to Noah, we definitely need to know how we're repopulating the earth again. So I said, rather focusing on this lineage, this passage defines the boundaries of these different tribes of people. So they're not exactly going person to person, like this one begot this one, and this one's dad was this one, and this was his son. It's talking about these people and kind of like in the areas and the boundaries and things like that. Instead of a chain of father-son relationship histories, chapter 10 explains a broad network of cousins following a shallow chain of like brotherly relationships. So Japheth, his people apparently settled mostly in the lands to the north of the region that would become the promised land of Israel. Okay, Ham, his people, remember Noah cursed him. Ham, his people would become central to Israel's story as told in the rest of the Bible. Peoples who eventually became known as Egyptians. His grandson Nimrod will establish a powerful kingdom both in Assyria and Babylon. And both of these countries, Assyria and Babylon, will be enemies to Israel. And Shem, it is his descendants that will lead to Abraham and to the nation of Israel. So the only thing I did on this page was, Noah's offering God thanks with the altar. I just didn't have a little picture of an altar, and I put in a little bit more of the animals. And then it was talking about, brotherly relationships and a broad network of cousins. So I thought the two little guys there would be fine. So we're continuing over here all the way down to where we get to the Tower of Babel. And it says, as the families of Noah's children grew, they continued as a community with one language and one culture. Eventually, they moved to the area known as Shinar and began to build a massive city with a huge tower. To avoid separating from each other, they planned to make themselves great and powerful on the earth. And over here, I put God exercises his power, authority, and creativity to confuse the languages of the earth and to disperse the people. Because God was not pleased. He was not pleased that they were building this tower. And when you first read it, you're like, wow, he's just really doesn't want them to, to stick together, to work together. He doesn't want them. I couldn't figure out why he was so upset. And then, commentary helped me really understand. It says, not only did they disobey God by his commandment of fill the earth, they were supposed to go out. These guys are staying together. That's the first thing they did wrong, okay? But they did not seek or acknowledge his help. They were like, we built these bricks. It's the newest technology we got. Let's do this. Let's build this great tower. And they even say, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. So that way, they're really going to work. And they have brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. And then they say, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its tops in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. So they're wanting to boast that, hey, man, we did this. We did this all by ourselves. We built bricks. We cooked them to the right temperature. We know that they're sound, they're stone. We're going to use the stone, the bitumen, which is basically like, ancient concrete mortar. They're real proud of themselves. And it was because they did not seek or acknowledge God's help. They became arrogant in their own self-reliance. And it's very obvious when we read what their specific, their quote was here in this verse. So God acknowledged nothing would be impossible if they continued to operate as one people with one language. And I think it's pretty awesome because it literally says, behold, they are one people and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they will propose to do will now be impossible for them. So God is literally saying that we have the capability to be amazing, okay? I mean, no matter how you want to look at the Tower of Babel and what he does, as punishment to the people who are not listening to his command to fill the earth, to seek his help, and to not be self-reliant, but to call upon the Lord. He's still saying these people are amazing, and the reason why is because we're made in his image. I mean, we are his creation. Of course he made us amazing, but we can't be arrogant. We can't do that, and we got to listen to his commands, and above all, especially in the Old Testament God, he's scary. You know, he's not so bad sometimes in the New Testament, but the Old Testament God can really give you the shivers. He really can. And when you sit down and think about a lot of the things that go on in the Old Testament, and as we go with daily readings, you'll see he's a vengeful and fearful Lord. You need to be fearing the Lord because he gets scary sometimes in the Old Testament. But I love how he just flat out acknowledges it. Yeah, there's nothing they can't do if they're sticking together and they're all speaking the same language. They're all got one purpose in mind and they're all working to it. There ain't nothing's going to stop them. But if you remember from the video, okay, when it came to Noah, when they had big cities, there was tons of sin. They were running rampant. And that's not what God wants happening all over again in his creation. So God acknowledged nothing would be impossible if they continue to operate as one people with one language. Mankind, left alone, can always find a way to commit any act of evil imaginable. To prevent it from happening, God confused and dispersed the people. And it sure worked. I got a little picture of the Tower of Babel where they're like, we can't work. I don't understand what you're saying, what he's saying. They don't know because he totally switched the dynamic there. Babel, when you look up the definition of it, is defined as incoherent language. And that's what his talking to her sounded like, and hers to him was incoherent. They couldn't work. You can't work if you cannot understand. And Babel later becomes Babylon. And that's extremely important later, but we'll get to that on that day's reading. So we go down here and we've got Shem's descendants, right? The second section of this chapter shows specifically in the line of Shem how they descend in a direct line from one to another. So when we've got this father to son type of genealogy, it's because we are trying to show from Shem, Noah's son, to where we end up, which is going to be in the time of Abram, okay? So they descend in a direct line from one to another. Also, the lifespans of men quickly decrease after the flood. Because remember, God said he wasn't going to let them live longer than 120 years, but we're still seeing that Noah lived, close to 950 years. People are still living quite long, but as we're going through the descendants of Noah's sons, we see that quickly after the flood, from nearly 1,000 years to roughly only 100 years by the time of Abram. So then we have this one individual, his descendants separated out absolutely by itself. And it's Terah. And Terah was Abraham and Lot's father. The family moved from Ur, and it's somewhere in southern Iraq, to about 600 miles closer to Canaan. From Haran, which is where they moved, God will call Abram and Sarai to leave their home and to move into the promised land of Canaan. These two will eventually be named Abraham and Sarah, two of Israel's most crucial ancestors. So today's reading wasn't too bad. I definitely learned a whole bunch of interesting things that, like I said, I have read Genesis before, but there was just a lot of things, like, normally I don't spend a lot of time on the genealogies, but tonight I really did, and I wanted to specifically to see, like, if I could get the regions and areas, like, where the sons of Noah just, they moved into, and so I did get that information. So when we came to the next genealogy over here was Shem, I was like, well, let's just follow this purpose, because basically what it's doing is it's trying to line us up from Adam all the way through the house of David, all the way through the birth of the Messiah, which is Jesus Christ. So I hope you guys enjoyed it tonight. I haven't done any pre-decorating, as you can see. We're now going to we basically finished with chapter 11. Most people say that Genesis should be broken down into two sections, and I was really happy to see that that was in the video today. That Genesis 1 through 11 is like of the creation and the fall. And then, 12 through 50, we're talking about Abraham. We're starting with God's chosen people. We're going to see how God is going to start working in the lives of his chosen people. And I hate to tell you, people, from what I know of the Bible, God's chosen people mess up all the time. But that's amazing. It's a story of redemption, no matter how you want to look at it. He chose these people, and they get into some situations, y'all, where even just reading the Bible, you're like, no, they didn't. They didn't. They should have learned, but they don't. Some do, most don't. And so we're going to start here now with tomorrow's reading. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you tomorrow. All right. Bye.